The difference between culture and diversity stems from the fact that culture represents a society's characteristics by means of several phenomena, while the term diversity, on the other hand, talks about differences in individuals. Diversity discusses how people who belong to one culture may differ from each other by means of various features. A country can be monocultural or multicultural, and each culture symbolizes the people's way of living, their beliefs and creativity, etc. Culture is not a biological product, but it is a man-made thing. Also, it is so dynamic as well as always changing. The English anthropologist, Edward B. Tyler is said to have first used the term culture in his book Primitive Culture, which was published in 1871. According to him, culture is that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, law, morals, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. On the other hand, culture is something that represents a community existence, whereas diversity refers mainly to individual differences. Different skills of people assist to enrich a culture, and it is always people who make a culture.
It's a big world, full of difference and diversity. How you see others is influenced by your own cultural perspective, and how others see you is influenced by their cultural perspective. What happens when you speak? Do people from other cultures understand you in the way you intended? And what happens with different cultures in the workplace? How rigid or flexible is their approach to rules? Is formal or informal behaviour expected? And how do different cultures approach timekeeping? In today's global business environment, it is essential to learn how to navigate across different cultural landscapes. You need a good set of tools to do this. You need an understanding of how different cultures trade and do business, an insight into how different cultures communicate, and a clear idea of how different cultures manage people. To be a savvy global traveller, you need to be willing to undertake the journey of understanding other cultures. Develop cultural intelligence so you can communicate confidently across cultures.
Intercultural communication is a form of communication that aims to share information across different cultures and social groups. It is used to describe the wide range of communication processes and problems that naturally appear within an organization or social context made up of individuals from different religious, social, ethnic, and educational backgrounds. Intercultural communication is sometimes used synonymously with cross-cultural communication. In this sense, it seeks to understand how people from different countries and cultures act, communicate and perceive the world around them. Many people in intercultural business communication argue that culture determines how individuals encode messages, what medium they choose for transmitting them, and the way messages are interpreted. With regard to intercultural communication proper, it studies situations where people from different cultural backgrounds interact. Aside from language, intercultural communication focuses on social attributes, thought patterns, and the cultures of different groups of people. It also involves understanding the different cultures, languages and customs of people from other countries. Intercultural communication plays a role in social sciences such as anthropology, cultural studies, linguistics, psychology and communication studies. Intercultural communication is also referred to as the base for international businesses. There are several cross-cultural service providers around who can assist with the development of intercultural communication skills. Research is a major part of the development of intercultural communication skills. Cross-cultural business communication is very helpful in building cultural intelligence through coaching and training in cross-cultural communication, cross-cultural negotiation, multicultural conflict resolution, customer service, business and organizational communication. Cross-cultural understanding is not just for incoming expats. Cross-cultural understanding begins with those responsible for the project and reaches those delivering the service or content. The ability to communicate, negotiate and effectively work with people from other cultures is vital to international business. The problems in intercultural communication usually come from problems in message transmission. In communication between people of the same culture, the person who receives the message interprets it based on values, beliefs, and expectations for behavior similar to those of the person who sent the message. When this happens, the way the message is interpreted by the receiver is likely to be fairly similar to what the speaker intended. However, when the receiver of the message is a person from a different culture, the receiver uses information from his or her culture to interpret the message. The message that the receiver interprets may be very different from what the speaker intended. Attribution is the process in which people look for an explanation of another person's behavior. When someone does not understand another, he/she usually blames the confusion on the other's stupidity, deceit, or craziness. Effective communication depends on the informal understandings among the parties involved that are based on the trust developed between them. When trust exists, there is implicit understanding within communication, cultural differences may be overlooked, and problems can be dealt with more easily. The meaning of trust and how it is developed and communicated vary across societies. Similarly, some cultures have a greater propensity to be trusting than others. Nonverbal communication is behavior that communicates without words, though it often may be accompanied by words. Minor variations in body language, speech rhythms, and punctuality often cause mistrust and misperception of the situation among cross-cultural parties. Kinesic behavior is communication through body movement, for example, posture, gestures, facial expressions and eye contact. The meaning of such behavior varies across countries. Oculesics are a form of kinesics that includes eye contact and the use of the eyes to convey messages. Proxemics concern the influence of proximity and space on communication, for example, in terms of personal space and in terms of office layout. For example, space communicates power in the US and Germany. Paralanguage refers to how something is said, rather than the content of what is said, for example, rate of speech, tone and inflection of voice, other noises, laughing, yawning, and silence. Object language or material culture refers to how we communicate through material artifacts, for example, architecture, office design and furniture, clothing, cars, cosmetics, and time. In monochronic cultures, time is experienced linearly and is something to be spent, saved, made up, or wasted. Time orders life, and people tend to concentrate on one thing at a time. In polychronic cultures, people tolerate many things happening simultaneously and emphasize involvement with people. In these cultures, people may be highly distractible, focus on several things at once, and change plans often.
What exactly is communication? The most simple definition is that communication is each act of transmitting information. Information in the broader sense of the word, including thoughts, ideas, and emotions. Giving someone a bouquet of flowers is communicating a certain message. Adding to that gift a verbal compliment, "you're pretty," is another separate act of communication. Blushing because you've just received flowers and a compliment is again another form of communication. As social animals, we communicate day in, day out with spoken words, non-verbal gestures, signs, and symbols. Sometimes we use media to communicate a message. Media are the channels that we use to communicate. Scholars don't really agree on the definition of the word media. Television, internet, radio, mobile phones, the soapbox we stand on to give a speech, they're all technical media in a way, things we constructed to amplify our communication. In the more broader definition, we can include our hands, voice, and eyes that we all use to communicate somehow, in the list of communication channels, of media. In general, however, whenever we discuss mediated communication or the mass media, we only mean the first category. Over the years, scientists from different scientific disciplines have studied these channels of communication and all these different forms that communication can take. The result of their studies have formed the basis of the relatively new science of communication. And even today, many scholars in other disciplines study the exact same communication phenomena as we do. We share theories and models and often use the same methods to analyze and describe our field. It is therefore useful to be aware of how these other disciplines are connected with ours. To get an idea of the different levels of communication and how they are connected to other scientific disciplines, we can look at the so-called pyramid of communication. On the highest level of this pyramid, we find societal communication, which is by its very nature aimed at a large mass audience. Therefore, mainly historians, political scientists, and sociologists study this perspective. Under that is the level of institutional communication, that is performed by political parties, for instance, organized religions, large corporations, and such. Then comes the level of group communication. Groups are audiences that feel a high level of group identification, for instance, a family or a fan club. Both institutional and group communication are in the field of sociology and cultural anthropology. We have now arrived to the level of interpersonal communication, basically the communication between two or more people. Both sociologists and psychologists study this field. Finally, there's the level of intrapersonal communication. This will be the communication you have with yourself. But this will mean all information processing, thinking, internalizing information, and the process of giving meaning to the world around us. And of course, this approach leans heavily on the discipline of psychology.
created using Powtoon.
When I use the term dialogue, I'm referring to a specific form of communication where participants, having their own perspectives, still recognize the existence of other different perspectives and remain open to them. It is not the same as monologue, where only one person is talking, and it is also not the same as debate, which can be described as serial monologues. Dialogue requires listening to the other and seriously attempting to understand what is said, and often, though not always, results in participants changing some of their assumptions. Intercultural dialogue has been used as a technical term by different people with different meanings. In one use, intercultural dialogue is used to refer to any interaction, mediated or face-to-face, in which the participants have different cultural backgrounds. Encompassing virtually all examples of intercultural communication, this may be discarded as too broad and not especially helpful. In a second use, intercultural dialogue refers to specific types of intercultural interactions, those in which dialogue is taken to be a specific goal. Dialogue in the sense that I gave you earlier, where you are at the very least listening to somebody else. This narrower use will be my focus tonight. Unlike other types of intercultural communication, which include nonverbal and unconscious elements, intercultural dialogue typically is assumed to require both language and intent, being a deliberate verbal exchange of views. Intercultural dialogues are designed to achieve understanding of cultural others as an immediate goal, with the more advanced steps of achieving agreement and cooperation held as potential later goals. Dialogue assumes difference. Intercultural dialogue specifically assumes intercultural differences between participants. People who already share all of their assumptions have no need for dialogue. Instead, dialogue implies members of different groups who have conflicting opinions and assumptions speaking to one another in acknowledgement of those differences and attempting to bridge the gap between their ideas. Wishing to present his or her own ideas and have them heard, each participant must agree to listen to the views of the other in exchange. Dialogue between those holding the most divergent viewpoints are, of course, the most difficult, but also the most critical. Although by common definition, dialogue does not require agreement as a result, participants frequently hope that agreement in at least some areas may be achieved. At the very least, understanding serves as a reasonable beginning and is certainly preferable to conflict.